I was talking to a number of influential Democrats this week about Antifa and about January 6th. Okay. And so imagine that an outside observer like a Canadian might look at the United States and think, well, the radical left has Portland and Minneapolis, and that's pretty damn ugly. And then the radical right has January 6th, and that's pretty ugly. And, maybe you could draw some kind of equivalency between the two, and maybe not, but I think you could at least make a reasonable initial case for something like that. January 6th had a lot of symbolic weight, if nothing else, and certainly did frighten people very badly. But when I was talking to these Democrats about Antifa and the riots, their attitude is sort of, well, there's always been riots and race riots in the United States throughout its entire history. So in some sense, it's really nothing out of the ordinary. And besides, Antifa doesn't really exist. And so I'd like you to address, if you would, both of those points. And I should point out, too, these were reasonable people making these points. These aren't radical leftists. These are people who are trying hard to pull the Democratic Party towards a moderate center, and who are very suspicious of the radical leftists, especially the grip they have on the education system. So they're good faith players and still. And the other thing they said to me was that they believed it was intellectually dishonest to draw a parallel between Portland and Minneapolis and January 6th, making the case that what happened on January 6th was much, much worse, like in a category of its own. And they justified that by referring to the fact that it was a direct assault on the Capitol building, and that there was presidential ambivalence about bringing that to a halt. So that's a rat's nest. So, you want to wade in?
Now, I have a question before we move on from this. What happened on January 6th? Call it what? The insurrection. I do believe that people who were part of that believe that to be 100% lawful, but not necessarily legal. But they found it within their rights, according to the Constitution, to if the federal government is not doing what they need them to do, or if they felt like something was done unjustly, then we the people can turn over the government if we wanted to, if that was the case. But from the medias that I was watching, just the news, because it was all over the news, and plus my wife was working for the Capitol then. They were going through a lot because of everything. But it came off as if it was almost allowed for the people to do that. Now, I know I saw all of the police trying to stop them from getting in there and everything, but the people who were rushing the Capitol were doing it almost as if they had the right to do it. So if y'all can give me more information on that, that would be dope, because even inside of my Discord last year, there were a few people in the Discord who were also down, in DC on that day, and they were a part of that. So if you were a part of it, or if you know anybody who was, could you please give me more information from your point of view, the point of view of someone who is communicating with a black man who has thought left and voted left his entire life. But although I haven't been watching the news or staying up on politics or anything like that, over the last, say, about 5-6 years, my ways of voting and everything, and what I paid attention to has been changing year after year, has been improving year after year, and I've been becoming more involved, which is why I'm here right now. So, and I know y'all see a bunch of reaction channels reacting to these sort of reactions nowadays. It's because it's trending, it's popular. But I'm actually doing it because I do want to learn something. Hopefully, I'm not talking too much, and if I am, charge that to my mind, not my heart. I'm really just trying to get some information. And Antifa, I heard that they were like an extremely racist club or group of people, but I didn't know that they were only liberal. I thought that they were liberal and conservative, or they was just, from what I understand, I just thought that they were white and that they were racist. But if you got more information about that, please give it to me.
Yes, Professor. So I think,
Professor?
let's say for good faith engagement from the left, I completely understand why there would be this perception that Antifa is a myth or doesn't really exist, because that's the propaganda that the public is fed from the legacy media and broadcast and in print, day in and day out, certainly since Trump was elected. It's an entirely different story, though, when you are on the ground, as I have been for years, and you see that militancy face to face. And when you see it, the organizational aspect of it is undeniable. That's what initially sparked my curiosity, because in Portland, where I'm from, when the election results in 2016, November, were announced, tens of thousands of people took to the streets. And within that, there was an organized element of people dressed in the same uniforms. At that time, it was unusual to cover your face, and they had weapons in a very strategic way. Smash and move on, cars, businesses, buildings, start fires, run. So it was from there that sparked my interest in wanting to learn more about what looks like an organized militia or paramilitary. So with that out of the way, though, I think the press, because of its compromised nature and generally being biased to the left, they have turned a blind eye to the evidence that shows that there's, depending on where you are, there's an organizational structure to Antifa. And the statement that Biden said infamously at one of the debates last year, Antifa is an idea, that statement in itself is true, but it's not the complete statement. You have, I think, one way to explain it that people can understand perhaps more easily is it's analogous to the worldwide jihadist phenomenon, in that you can have people who are actual members of organizations like Boko Haram or IS or Al Qaeda or any of these other jihadist groups. But you have people as well who are sympathetic to the ideology and act on it. And in that regard, I think you can think of the contemporary manifestations of Antifa in the United States, Canada, and in Western countries along the same lines. You can have people who self-identify in, and simply all they do is go to these protests or riots based on flyers they see online. Then you have actual cells that operate, such as Rose City Antifa, which is an organized group. You can go on their website and look at the Q&A, and they actually have one of the questions is, how do I join? And they said that currently membership is closed.
Wow. They got so many people, they ain't even accepting more. Like, we crowded, bro. We crowded until a couple of them, pass on, go live with the Lord, go meet Jesus. Then that's when we'll start accepting more people. But until then, no more people. Dang, people signing up for Antifa and be like, man, I couldn't get in this. You try to get into? Psh, my friend got in though. Really? Yeah, he got a scholarship. He got a scholarship to Antifa? All paid? Oh man. Huh? Ooh, okay.
So there's that, and in my book, I published some of the primary documents of the curriculum from Rose City Antifa, which is actually one of the cells that's part of a network called the Torch Antifa Network, and they have cells in other cities. So from, it's kind of all of the above. It's ideology, it's horizontally organized, it's disorganized, it's also highly organized in some cases. So it's because of that lack of centralized hierarchical authority that makes it easy for those who want to obfuscate and confuse the public about it, because they can point and say, well, there's no single leader. Who's the leadership? Show me the leadership. And because there is no single person who's heading everything, then the response is, well, that's evidence that they don't exist. To counter that.
So this is a real problem conceptually, right? I mean, and let's think about it to begin with as a problem that we all face instead of a political problem emanating either from the left or the right. Okay, because I think there's a deeper problem here that isn't exactly partisan. And we'll get into the partisan element of it later. So imagine, first of all, okay, so I assume that the description you gave would be the one that you gave, is that, okay, so what we have here is we have some actual organizations. Let's focus on Rose City and Antifa. But it's a radically distributed organization. And we don't even know how radically distributed. And it's almost impossible to identify its core members or even to define what core membership might be. Now, you did point to Rose City Antifa, but if I said, for example, well, how many other Antifa groups are there that have an identifiable organizational strategy that's akin to Rose City Antifa? How many do you have any sense of that?
Just a few dozen. There aren't very many, but the thing is, many they close and then they spring up as new ad hoc groups under different names, but it's really the same, relatively the same people involved.
Are black people in Antifa? That's what I want to know. Are black people in Antifa? Could you please let me know that?
Okay, a few dozen. So that's real interesting. So that's like, let's say 24. Just let's make this concrete because I think it'll be interesting to do so. So in that 24, how many people do you think are core involved in each group? Do you think it's like 5? Is it 3? Is it 10? Like real hardcore people who are devoting their time to this, you know, like maybe they're unemployed. That would be a real shock. And it's their full-time job, something like that. How many people?
Across the entirety of the United States, if most of them, let's say, were averaging around the same size as Rose City Antifa, then I would say in total, we're looking at below 1,000 people in across the entire United States. So hundreds, which is, you know, in the scheme of things and for the scale, that's a very small number.
Yeah, well, it's so small that you could say that it's, and I'm not saying this, but it's so small that you could say that it's non-existent, right?
But you did say it, Dr. Peterson.
Because it's 1 in 300,000 if it's the US. It's such a tiny minority of people that they barely exist. But what that points to is something actually, that minimizing it in that manner actually points to something far more sinister. Because what it means is that under 1,000 committed people can radically destabilize whole cities and pose a threat to the integrity of entire culture, not least by fostering polarization and the degeneration of the political scheme that comes along with that. And so that's a real danger for all of us, particularly if it's the case that groups like that can multiply their power by pulling other, you know, semi-attached and maybe not so violent or even extremist people in on the basis of their empathy.
Exactly.
I mean, but that's the thing, though. Most people are good, nonviolent people. So a small militia can take out a whole bunch of good, nonviolent people. That's why the Second Amendment is encouraged. The Second Amendment is encouraged because in the event of something going down and you got to protect your family, then you gotta make sure that you have your own artillery, you have your own plans, and that everyone in your family know how to operate your artillery properly and safely. But yeah, I think that's what a lot of people have been saying on the news for a long time now, especially the right. The right are always talking about the Second Amendment.
Concentric circles probably is a good way to explain it. What you asked me, the concrete number of how many people are actually core in terms of involved in the organizing, the planning, attending meetings or trainings, like as you said, almost non-existent given the population size of the US. However, the larger concentric circle is of their sympathizers, and I think the role of the press, particularly, I would say since the election of Trump, helped really to mainstream the so-called Antifa ideology. It put day in and day out for the entire world that this belief that America had elected a fascist president under Trump, that we were experiencing a regime change, that there would be genocide, and on the face, I mean, these ideas are these accusations are so outrageous and I would say laughable, but people genuinely believed it. You know, go back 5 years, remember like this
So I
sense of
believe. So I.
Okay. Yeah, I have a bunch of questions, but I'm not gonna run my mouth too much. But I do. He just now said something. Trump was considered to be a fascist president. What the he double hockey sticks is a fascist president? You got fascist, you got socialist, you got communist, you got capitalist, you got all these different things. I swear we got so many daggone names and labels for everything, man. But let me know, fascist, because it seemed like he spoke the language of a whole lot of people who were not being listened to for a great deal of time. And when he started speaking for the people who needed someone to speak for them and didn't really speak the language of the people who were already in time and time again, it just made them more vocal. It let them know that their voice was heard. So I really want to know what this means. What does it mean to be a fascist president? All right. Let me know in the comments below. And if you have yet to hit that subscribe button, please make sure you do so on your way out the door. Once again, guys, I am Van, and now we are all the LFR family, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video, hopefully inside the Patreon as well. And shout out to our first 3 super thanks that we got on our videos. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. All right. I'll see you on the next one. Love y'all.